Welcome to Be Held's podcast, What's Your Story? Where lyrics are more than just words. I'm Giselle Inez, your host, a licensed mental health counselor and model, guiding you through the journey of self-discovery and authenticity. Join me as we explore the heart and mind of an artist. This podcast is a safe space where your vulnerability is your superpower. So let's just dive in, and I'm sure we all just want to get into that mind of yours and talk more about what inspired this song. So walk us through this journey.
Yeah, so this is the first song on the debut album I released back in September. It's called Identity Crisis, and kind of just a little background for people who don't know the album, since this is going to be, the first episode of the series. Reflection is an album basically about my story. I've been really into conceptual albums, so big inspirations have been like Kid Cudi, Kendrick Lamar, Frank Ocean.
Love him.
So with the idea of a concept album, you kind of have, I guess, this intro and this big ending. Kind of stick to a theme. I've always been big into sticking in the themes.
We love a good theme.
Yeah, I figured the best way to start, I guess, my journey as an artist and dropping my first project would be kind of a biography about myself for those people who don't know much about me. I think that's a good way to kind of introduce myself.
I think it's a great way. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so the first song, even before Identity Crisis, just talking about just a kind of that intro track, not necessarily a full laid out song structure. It's
right.
Called Dear Myself.
Okay.
And that kind of just introduces the album, and it introduces an album in a way of kind of a book where each song within this album is treated as certain chapters within my life, reaching overall to a ending conclusion.
Love that. That's beautiful, especially dear myself. You're really writing a letter to yourself, and I think that's so powerful.
So if we were to get into the first song,
walk us through that journey. What was going on in your mind, in your heart?
Yeah. So funny thing about this song, first of all, this album was 3 years in the making. So anyone who wants to make art, just know it is a long, tedious process. If you really want to put your soul into this stuff, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. But I promise you, at the end of the day, it's worth it.
It's all worth it, right? When you really put all your, said, your heart and your soul into something.
Yeah. So I'd say it's 2024 right now. So this was kind of honestly, probably being the first song as well. But I think this first verse is kind of what started this kind of album idea and this concept I wanted to make. It started in the shower. So
the shower, as most, always
incredible ideas stem from, right? So
yep.
Think about just talking about, I guess, the creative process before we get into the lyrics and sharing the story. The podcast being called What Is Your Story?
Right.
I want to kind of dive into the lyrics, song structure. Before we get into that, so the creative process, I just want to say it can happen anywhere, and I promise you, anytime you have an idea in life, make sure you write that down anywhere.
Yes.
Because, oh my God, if I ever meet anyone who's watching this podcast in person, I just got to show you my notes app of complete just mumbled garbage of lyrics I'd written.
I love that.
Anywhere. I mean, whether that be in the airport, whether that be on the toilet, whether that be literally anywhere, I just always just make sure you have that notes app open and writing it down, because I don't know how the world works, and I don't know how songwriting works. There's no real process when it comes to my creative process. It's kind of just trusting your gut. Yeah. You kind of have a theme written in your head, and I feel like if you're true to yourself and you know what you want to write about, the words come out in an order.
it's like your heart is speaking for you.
Yeah.
Like you're not in your mind and you're not
Exactly.
overthinking it.
And that's what I love so much about it, because, you know, being an overthinker myself, it's just, my mind is usually just everywhere, racing all over the place. But
I feel like we all can relate to that too.
Yeah.
Just like we're constantly in our heads that
Exactly.
even today we're like, what, you know, I feel like that's a thing of who am I? What do I want? What do, you know, purpose, right? And
Purpose.
so when you say like you connect back to your heart and like in that moment you're really just spilling words out. It's that moment where your heart is speaking.
No,
That's awesome.
Exactly. And speaking of purpose, I think this would be a, you know, great transition to just talk a little bit, you know, about song structure, what the song's about, right? So Identity Crisis being the first song is, I think this song particularly relates a lot to, I guess, teenagers, I'd say, because I wrote this in the perspective of, you know, what I was going through as a teenager, right? It's just, you know,
tough years.
A lot of people get lost in their 20s as well, but the whole song is kind of just about not knowing who you are.
Yeah.
So,
and it's kind of it's like a different loss, right? In your teens versus like a different loss in your 20s and 30s and so forth and so far and so forth.
Who knows? And who knows if there is, like, I spent a lot of time in life, I guess, chasing truth or just trying to understand how things work. I don't know, it comes from, you know, my kind of like engineering background and stuff like
Being
that.
Curious.
Always trying to be curious.
That's good.
Trying to come to conclusions of things, but I realize in life that you kind of just have to let things flow naturally and things will work.
Yeah. And not everything is supposed to make sense.
No.
Or you're not supposed to have all the answers in that moment.
No. As long as you have the ideas thrown out there, and that's why I say always just write down ideas. Because as long as you have the idea thrown out there, maybe the idea isn't coming out at that time, you know, because it's maybe not the right time, you know.
Right.
Sometimes these ideas take time to brew. You need to meet the right people.
To execute them.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So.
But in that moment, it's really important to take that inspired action and not procrastinate on it. So like when that thought comes up, when that feeling comes up, grab your phone, open that notes app and just put it down.
Exactly.
Love that.
Exactly. So talking about this first verse, I'm just going to read it through real quick. So it goes, I'm a lost fish in the crowds, can't find my friends, always been the clown, looked stupid for their amusement, in return I had a group to move with. So just going off those first 4 lines,
which are really powerful and a lot of people can relate to.
Thank you. Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, that's just basically, you know, like I said, just being lost. So some background, I graduated in 8th grade in a school of 15 kids.
That's such a small class. Small class.
Going from kind of a small, like, close-knit community to being, like, thrown into a high school with 400 kids, not knowing a single person.
Big transition, like almost like a culture shock, right?
Huge jump at 14 years old.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just felt like I knew nothing, but a common theme I always had as a kid was, I'd say, absorbing people's personalities. And it's a big flaw that I guess it's kind of considered people pleasing, but it's a big flaw that I've always like kicked myself in the back for. I've always learned to fit into groups by kind of just absorbing the group's personality, if that makes sense.
You really just wanted to belong.
And I just wanted, I wanted to belong. That felt like my purpose. But at the end of the day, if you're doing this with, you know, so many different friend groups and so many different people, then, you know, what group do you fit in? Are you who you say you are?
Yeah. Stuff
like that. So that's kind of where I was going with this.
It also sounds like in that first verse, though, that friend group maybe wasn't the best kind of friend group. No, you know what I mean? Like, I think it's nice when you're surrounded by good people that you feel aligned with. But if you're saying that you weren't being yourself and you were trying to fit in and have people like you, it did quite the opposite. Like you felt like you weren't belonging.
Yeah. And with trying to fit in with groups, with trying to absorb people's personalities, I think what I was trying to say here is just, you know, I did everything I could, whether that meant, you know, making myself look stupid, being kind of like, I guess like the jester, like just being stupid to get people's attention.
Yeah.
But
you were like entertaining them.
Entertaining, exactly.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're the punching bag, you do fit into groups eventually, but you don't fit it for the right purpose. So I think that's what I kind of talk about at the other four lines from this first verse. I think people that kind of relate to this theme can fit like, but I didn't have a spot on the sidewalk though. Couldn't tell if they were my friends or my foes. Yeah. So what I'm just saying there is like, this is for like the kids that, this is like just a little like funny comparison, but yeah, I know a lot of kids, there's those kids that don't get to walk on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
It's like,
yes.
Yeah, I was trying to make that comparison because it's just a really, I don't know if that's just me, but I feel like it's a common theme for people that, try to fit in or think they're in a friend group, but they're really just pushed off to the side,
Yeah.
I mean, it's may seem like a small thing, but, that can mean a lot.
Big impact.
At that age, exactly.
Big impact, especially at that age, right? When, like we said before, you want to feel belong, but like 3 people are walking on the sidewalk and you're like walking on the street in a way, and it's just like, damn,
Exactly. So, and then the first verse wraps up with benched over others because I couldn't provide, so I guess I gotta prove it, just give me some time. So
yeah, share more about that.
Yeah, that's kind of just giving I guess a big middle finger up to to the people that like, don't take me seriously, basically. This is like, you can't, at the end of the day, the older I've gotten is like, you can't, I personally can't be upset at these people. I can't have animosity because that's kind of the role I played to fit in.
Right.
I felt like I couldn't be myself to fit in normally, so I had to act stupid. So part of that has to do with myself, but in the moment, I was really upset for a long period of time. This is a common theme within, I guess, my early years, is just not getting the respect I wanted. And I always wanted to prove people wrong for not getting that, respect. I kind of always wanted that taste of revenge, which is not the best way to approach it.
Yeah. And when you're talking about that, what I'm picking up is there's a big theme of mirroring in your whole album, right? And in your story. And when you say that of wanting respect, and it sounds like now you've learned to take accountability, right? You're saying that I can't have animosity towards them. It's because you took accountability that like I put myself, or in that moment it was me who was doing that to myself. And so in a way, at that age, anyone, like it's hard to respect ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And it's reflected in the people that we're surrounded by.
Yeah. And especially at that age, it seems like friend groups are everything.
They really are.
If you don't fit in, if you're not part of a group, it is so hard to be alone at that age.
Yeah. Because you spend your whole day in school.
Yeah.
Right? Like from morning till late afternoon, you're in school, constantly around groups of people.
Yep.
So
the slightest bit of gossip can just mean the end of the world.
Exactly.
At that age.
And everything feels so big, right?
So
because
big,
when you really think about it, our experience in life is like this small.
Exactly.
Because we've only lived X amount of years. So it's like we don't really have much
it's just a
to
bubble.
compare. Yeah.
So that second verse kind of goes into, the revenge and like living the lifestyle I truly wanted, because it wasn't just revenge, but I think I wanted power, I wanted friends, because it always felt like something that was like necessary. It was just like I always thought like, oh, the coolest kids and the strongest people just have the most friends. So the most respected,
That's what you saw, and that's what came
exactly
like to one of your core beliefs, it sounds.
Exactly. So the second verse starts off saying, Now my status has grown exponentially, invited to the parties, now it shouldn't feel less of me. But I've been feeling lonelier the more friends I had next to me. Knew I couldn't befriend myself. I was my worst enemy.
Whoa. That just gave me the chills, actually. I just got the chills.
Yeah, so this was just like the realization that, like, at the end of the day, I achieved what I wanted. I achieved the power. I achieved the fame. The 1%er of people in high school.
Like you became one of the cool guys.
One of the cool guys, right?
Yeah.
But realizing that was a valuable lesson. Just realizing when you're on the top of it all and you're actually feeling lonelier than you were when you first started
empty.
with zero friends. That just taught me a lot about just how kind of life works. And that was such a valuable lesson. Going into the rest of the verse.
Yeah.
Always struggled with the mirrors. Lighting couldn't help me see. Always struggled with the demons. Life felt like a hellish dream. I know that the younger version of me wouldn't like the man I am. And I don't blame him because I never told him I'm his biggest fan.
Another chills. Chills.
That last line when I wrote that really just, I took a step back, and that one really hit me, and it really like cemented this realization that, kind of going back to the theme of the song, identity crisis, right?
Yeah.
I forgot to give myself a pat on the back for being myself.
Yeah.
And I forgot who Brandon was. You
Right.
know? I forgot essentially my purpose. I forgot my values, my morals. I sacrificed that all to live a life that I thought, would make me happy. But at the end of the day, hurt me even more because, like you were saying with mirrors and stuff, I think it's a common theme in this because, like a reflection, I didn't know who I was at the end of the day.
Right.
Everything felt great in the moment, hanging out with people, but every time I would come home, and I was alone with myself, hated myself. Like, couldn't even look at myself in the mirror,
And that's a really hard place to be, right? And it sounds like when you were writing that last line, and I don't blame him because I never told him I'm his biggest fan, that was a turning point for you of it almost sounds like you wanted to give your younger self a big hug. Exactly. Right? Like in that moment. And what I'm hearing too is when you're that young and you're trying to learn who you are and who you want to be around, it almost sounds like you didn't give yourself that space to grow, that space to get to know yourself more. And if you did find out something that you did like, maybe you weren't comfortable sharing it or expressing it. And that's also really painful to hide yourself and feel like isolated when you're alone with your thoughts, right? Like you mentioned.
Yeah. And it's something I'm still working on today, but I think I had a slower start on that. And yeah, it's just been something I've been trying to improve every day because at the end of the day, no matter how you view it, when you're, on your last days, all you have is yourself.
Yeah.
And you realize happiness only revolves around the choices you decide to make.
Right.
With yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Every single other factor of it is completely external and out of your control.
Right.
It all boiled down to you. You choose, how you want to perceive life.
Yeah. I was told by someone very wise way back that we are all entitled to our thoughts and feelings. It's what we do with them that matters.
Yeah.
And when you say like taking accountability, that's just so important.
Exactly.
And so I feel like a lot of people can really relate to that, right? So like really just, like you said, till this day, you're still trying to find out who you are.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's just an ongoing journey for every single person because we're
Definitely.
always evolving and changing and meeting new people along the way.
Exactly.
And you're also meeting new versions of yourself along the way too.
Ever changing. And that's the beauty of just being human.
Yeah.
Yeah, and while the song is kind of written in the perspective of a teenager, like you said, I think the song can relate to anybody because at the end of the day, no matter how much you know yourself, do you really know yourself? I think, like you said, it's a never ending journey. You're always learning. You should always be learning.
Always. And that's a choice. That's a choice to make, to always want to continue learning and being curious.
And it's funny because every time I think I know myself, every time I think life is set in equilibrium, it always finds a way to humble me and kind of shoot me off path. But I realize that's just to keep me growing. I realize you gotta look at that from a different light, you know? Absolutely. Lessons are just endless, you know? And I think me going on a little bit of a tangent, right? But in my opinion, everyone should live the truest and, you know, best version of themselves. And doing that is never easy. But you can never make excuses about that either. Right. You really just always have to fight and persevere because at the end of the day, struggling through things or really like putting like I guess like Sisyphus into example, right? It's just a guy who is shunned from the gods and was forced to eternally push this giant heavy boulder infinitely up a mountain.
Right.
But he realized at the end of the day that, you know, he could look at this as a never-ending challenge.
Right.
Detrimentally, you know, or, you know, he could find beauty in it.
Yes.
And I think once you learn to find beauty in the struggle, you realize that's the strongest emotion, the strongest point of just being a human being, and that's the essence of being a human being.
I love
you should
that.
Always be struggling.
I love that. It's so powerful because it really reflects your creativity and this outlet for you, right? Like you took your struggles and your pain and you found the beauty in it and it shifted your perspective. You grew from it. And I love that. And I think it's so important. And that really is a valuable, it becomes like wisdom to move with throughout your life. And so if little baby Brandon was sitting across from you right now in this moment after this song, what would you tell him as if he was literally just sitting right here across from you?
Stop caring. I don't put that in a nihilistic tone because I was a very nihilistic person. In high school, like, what matters? Nothing matters. Why should I try? But kind of flipping that around and saying nothing matters, you know? Yeah. Because of that, I should try everything. Like, because at the end of the day, nothing matters. Like, you know? It's
not as big as like it feels or it seems in that moment.
Exactly.
Like
just having that perspective makes you just tone the knob down a little bit. You know? Takes the pressure off. Being a perfectionist myself, you know, there were so many times, especially even like writing this album, that it was so. I was so ready to quit this project so many times. I was so ready to quit music so many times.
Right.
Because I started holding such high regard to myself and to my writing, where just like you forget, and I think this just goes back to that verse too. Like, I don't blame him because I never told him I'm his biggest fan. I got into this because I just needed a place to, you know, let my feelings out, to vent, to say things. I'm a very when I speak, I'm all over the place. When I think, I'm all over the place. But songwriting was the one outlet where things just came out in such a concise and meticulous kind of matter. It all was structured, and it dragged all the points across in a deeper level than I thought I could understand, right? So I say this because back in high school, it's like, I became such a critic to myself, and I forgot why I started this journey to begin with.
Right.
I'm like, you're very vulnerable with music, but holy crap, like, I don't even know if I could show the world the first songs I had written.
Right, yeah.
I think the very first song I wrote was it's a Love Me instrumental by the Drake song. That Drake song.
We love you, Drake.
Oh my god. It was so bad looking back at it.
Well,
but
when you say that, like, you just write everything down, everyone, even myself, we could relate in that sense of, like, this paper isn't meant to be seen by any person, like, not a single soul on this planet. But you and a lot of artists, every artist out there, I think it's beautiful that you you have the courage to persevere through that fear of being really seen and really being vulnerable and reminding people what vulnerability really is. And this is how I feel, and I'm not the only one feeling this way. And it really brings us all closer together, where you're really not alone in that journey. And I love that the message you continue to bring, especially throughout this album and with Identity Crisis, of, you felt very much alone, but, like, now this song, so many people are going to listen to it and be like, wow, I could really relate. And I was never alone after all.
Yeah. And that brings up a great point. Thanks for bringing that up, because I think that's kind of the sole purpose I want to show with my music is vulnerability and relatability. I want to kind of put you in a perspective that, oh yeah, I go through these same things. And like you said, it just makes you not feel, alone. And I think that's like a perfect transition, I guess, for the end of this track. I really love double entendres. Just a side note. I think that's where 2020 is where, like, I think my songwriting really elevated, because COVID hit. So, I was trying to find something to do with my free time after, I was done with school. You're just, like, home all day.
Right.
Not seeing anyone.
Yep.
So
super isolated.
Yeah. I think that's when I really fell in love with music, and I really learned how to be happy with myself, just being with myself, just being content with myself, because I was always hide myself with other people, right? Or hide how I was feeling, hanging out with other people, distract what's truly going on back home, right? So Frank Ocean was that artist that really hit me with vulnerability.
Yes.
And I am such a nerd for how songs are just, like, written and structured.
You, like, really appreciate.
And I really appreciate, like, Frank Ocean was that artist that, like, just blew me away. Chance was probably the first. I really love his songwriting approach. It's really different. And his wordplay. I think that's why I got into hip hop originally.
So unique.
The wordplay, but Frank Ocean was the first artist I remember. I remember listening to Chanel Orange and Blonde back to back. And I print out the whole album and literally just take notes. Like,
it's amazing.
What is he trying to say here? And just, like, admiring his work, because just realizing how much he's saying with a few words. And I think that's just the beauty of the English language, or just language in general, not the English language, just, like, language in general, right?
Right.
And double entendres have always been, like, how a special place in my heart. I think all of my first works are released on Spotify. If you're a Day One fan, like Dazed. A lot of the stuff I originally had written are songs of double entendres.
It's like less is more.
A double meaning. Yeah, just kind of. I find it so cool that a word has multiple meanings. And if you say a sentence in the right way, it could be interpreted both ways or even 3 ways sometimes. Some of the best artists, Kendrick does it a bunch.
Wow,
Frank
I love
Ocean
that.
does it a lot,
It really shows the complexity of what your mind and heart can create in that moment.
Yeah.
I love that. Like, just there's so many dimensions to it.
Exactly. And a lot of this song, if you really want to delve into the lyrics, like a lot of this song has these double entendres. I would say that, like, at least for the verses, especially that first verse, I think like every 2 lines kind of double entendre or kind of intertwined, where like the first line kind of relates to the third, right? So I mean, what I'm trying to get at this is the outro being, make a change. I ain't leaving till I find a way to make a change. That was really powerful for me to write, and I really wanted to just keep reiterating that, because that doesn't only just go back to the theme of the album of just telling your story,
right?
And like the song itself, just trying to make a change, right? But I'm not only just trying to change myself, I'm trying to change how people think about themselves. I'm not leaving this earth until my purpose is complete.
Wow.
By making this change.
Ooh, I just got the chills again.
Yeah, so that's the one thing people can get from this album, and especially this song, is just you yourself. Like, you're not leaving here till you're making that change in yourself, that change in your perspective, that change in how you view life. And you're not leaving until you make an impact. You literally make a change on other people. So
I love that ripple effect of powerful change, right?
Yeah.
Like, you are role modeling it. You are living it, you are breathing it, and the more people you meet, the more people hear your music. It sounds like you hope for them to share their vulnerability, to be seen, to no longer hide, and that they're not alone.
I don't care how big this gets. I just hope it reaches the right audience.
And I think most of all, what's really important too, to full circle, is I think the most powerful thing, especially from this song, is that you were able to connect back to younger Brandon. Yes. Right? Like you said, at the end of all of this, you only have yourself, right? Exactly. And so the fact that you are making a change and you're not leaving till you make a change, right?
Not giving up.
You did that for him. And I hope that is enough for you too, right? Moving forward. And it sounds like it is. It sounds like connecting back to younger Brandon is the most powerful. And I hope that for everyone who connects to your music, that they connect back to their younger selves.
That's what I want everyone to think, is just think of the little version of themselves that had no kind of structure in how life works. Didn't think about the adult life, or didn't get swooped into all these like problems, right? Yeah. If there were no problems in the world, and you could live that life from a childlike mindset, like what would you tell yourself as a kid? Right. And if you were to sit in a room with that little version of yourself, and he sees you, like you said, as the role model, like what would his reaction be? Right. Would he be happy with how he turned out? I think that's something we should always strive to achieve.
I love
just
that.
Being the truest person to yourself. Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your vulnerability, walking us through the journey and your creative process. And I'm looking forward to the next episode and hearing more about your journey and your story.
Me too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening and being a part of the Ripple Effect of Empathy on Be Held's podcast. What's your story? Together, we can continue to create a world filled with genuine connections and heartfelt stories. Click the link below to continue this transformative experience.